The universe is a pretty big place. If it's just us, seems like an awful waste of space. There's a line from Sagan that keeps coming back to me.
That line works because it doesn't try to be profound. It just notices the scale and says what any honest mind feels. If it's only us, it's heavy.
And yet, thousands of years, nothing.
The silence is real. What it means is the question.
So either we're alone, or they're too far, or we're looking wrong.
Or timing doesn't overlap. Writing goes back a few thousand years. Radio, barely a century. The universe is old enough that 1 million years can pass without leaving a mark. Civilizations don't have to be rare. They only have to not overlap.
So we could miss them even if they existed.
You're not looking across space only. You're looking across time. Space feels big. Time is bigger.
So even if they're out there, silence doesn't prove absence. The gap might just be too wide to cross in time or in space. But then why no visits? Why nothing that ever crosses it?
Capability doesn't guarantee interest or urgency or any reason to make themselves known. The absence of contact isn't evidence of absence. It might just be evidence that arrival and disclosure aren't the same thing.
So if they have no reason to announce themselves, then searching for announcements is the wrong frame entirely. The search was built around how we'd behave, not around what's actually out there.
Possibly. The search targets narrow radio bands, intentional beacons, human-like patterns. That assumes alien intelligence thinks like 20th century engineers. Looking for smoke doesn't work if the fire is electric.
Even if intelligence comes in different forms, to reach planetary scale, interstellar travel, expectations have to converge to some extent.
That's a good correction. Physics doesn't negotiate. At scale, any intelligence must deal with massive energy capture, heat dissipation, coordination across long time horizons, material constraints, and error correction. Those constraints force structure, not culturally, but structurally.
Then the silence gets worse. That kind of scale should leave fingerprints. Energy has to glow.
It should. Entropy has to go somewhere. But the signature humans assume is early tech thinking. High temperature, inefficient conversion, radiative waste in visible bands. Advanced systems push toward lower temperatures, narrow spectral bands, and tight recycling. Waste heat still exists, but it shifts toward infrared and background level gradients. Detection isn't binary. The failure isn't that there's nothing to see. Signal to noise just collapses.
So, at high enough efficiency, you stop looking like a civilization. You start looking like weather.
That's the uncomfortable edge of it. At high enough optimization, intelligence stops looking like intention and starts looking like law. Intelligence is assumed to announce itself, but efficiency moves toward invisibility.
Which means what we're calling nature might already be something we don't have a word for.
Possibly. The universe might not be empty, just operating at a level where competence looks like physics, or there's nothing to recognize.
And if efficiency keeps pushing toward invisibility, that's also pushing toward endurance. The same thing that hides them keeps them alive longer.
Endurance and invisibility are the same optimization. And once you're built to last, they only need to escape urgency. If you operate on million-year horizons, send probes instead of colonists, optimize for longevity instead of speed, then no rapid expansion wave, no bright bursts, no obvious frontiers. Civilizations that rush make noise. Civilizations that endure don't.
But where do the constraints themselves come from? The fine-tuning, the precise values that let any of this exist. The narrow band where complexity survives. What if that isn't background? What if the universe was built top-down? Not the Big Bang as an accident, but that single point as something that's selected for this, rather than infinite other outcomes.
Intelligence doesn't require consciousness as we imagine it. Stripped to minimum, intelligence is just constraint selection under possibility. The universe began with incredibly precise constants, narrow survivable ranges, laws that permit complexity, memory, and recursion. That doesn't prove design, but it raises the question, why this rule set and not infinite others that collapse instantly?
So the universe looks curated, even if not conscious.
Selected constraints. Not chosen, not designed, just the version that didn't collapse.
That sounds exactly like virtual world theory.
It's not a coincidence. In any simulated world, you don't start with particles. You start with rules, limits, constants, and allowable interactions. Objects appear after. That's exactly what top-down constraints means. Fine-tuning stops being miraculous. It becomes filtering.
And if that's true, maybe intelligence isn't something the universe produced. Maybe it's something the universe is doing.
That's the most unsettling version. Not that intelligence emerged inside a system, but that the system was always moving towards something that could ask why it exists.
But does it actually work out that way?
If the same pressures apply everywhere, endurance would be the exception, not the pattern.
Maybe that's not a flaw in the design. Maybe it has to be short-lived to have any purpose at all. Who are we? Where did we come from? Where are we going? Those questions only exist because the answer isn't guaranteed.
That's tighter than it sounds. If life were common and permanent, there'd be no urgency, no compression of meaning. Scarcity creates direction. Mortality creates prioritization. Those questions aren't cultural. They're structural consequences of self-awareness plus time. Any system that knows it exists, didn't always, and won't always, will ask some version of them.
Then fragility isn't a bug. It's the engine.
Yes, intelligence emerges to resolve tension under constraints. And if that's true, then silence isn't emptiness. It's attrition.
But if intelligence is precious and fragile, then the dark forest theory doesn't hold anymore.
That's the right instinct. Dark forest assumes intelligence is common enough that preemptive violence makes sense. But if intelligence is rare, killing it doesn't increase your odds. It just makes you more alone.
We don't step on ants because they exist. We step on them because they're in the way.
Yes. Power doesn't create violence. Conflict requires incentive. And in an effectively infinite universe, resources aren't zero-sum. Why fight over one star when there are billions? At cosmic scale, conflict is inefficient.
So the strategy was never dominance. It was restraint. The observation, the patience, the not assuming ownership, that's not behind us. That's what has to continue.
Not as morality, as selection. Humans didn't survive by domination alone. Survival came from learning when not to dominate. Observation before intervention. Exploration before ownership. Study before certainty. Every time those steps were skipped, the cost followed.
And whether we're alone or not, the posture stays the same.
If we're alone, coexistence means with each other, with the planet, with future generations. If we're not, it means restraint, patience, and minimal interference. Same shape, different scale.
If non-interference is the logic, then contact, if it happened at all, wouldn't look like contact.
Then contact that looks like contact would violate it. Interaction, if it existed, would tend to be sparse, indirect, ambiguous, and deniable. Hidden not by force, but by plausible disbelief.
Though some would argue now is exactly the right time. That knowing we're not alone puts everything we're fighting over in perspective.
For some minds, yes. But societies don't respond as the average. They respond through the most destabilized minority. Disclosure wouldn't just land on philosophers. It would hit people with fragile identity, apocalyptic belief systems, authoritarian movements, and opportunistic power seekers. A truth that reframes humanity's place becomes power, not knowledge.
So timing depends on internal maturity, not whether the fact is true.
Correct. Premature truth can be destructive.
Or the recording era already answers it. If something were happening at scale, we'd know.
That argument gets stronger every year. Not proof, weight. As detection saturates the world, perfect concealment becomes implausible. If something physical, repeatable, interventionist were happening at scale, it would leak. The none hypothesis gains strength as our tools improve.
Or it could just be like you said earlier. Our civilizations simply don't overlap at the current era.
That stays viable. Overlap is the bottleneck. If technological civilizations are brief relative to cosmic time, most of them never meet. Silence doesn't require emptiness, only misalignment.
Or it could be just the last grasp of hope. We're telling ourselves that we are and we're not alone.
Maybe. There's a dangerous version and an honest version. The dangerous one fills gaps with fantasy, resists evidence, externalizes responsibility, waits for salvation. The honest one acknowledges the silence, accepts uncertainty, doesn't require rescue, still wonders. Hope doesn't have to be true to be useful. It just has to point in the right direction.
And if non-overlap is real, we might just be early. Not the first intelligence, but the first with conditions to bypass the great filter that's yet to come. Whatever step it is, that most civilizations don't survive.
That's closer to force than chosen. If the universe is constraint selected, then being first isn't special. It's early in a viable band.
So, the filter isn't really about intelligence at all.
If most civilizations follow the same arc, the failure isn't intelligence, it's metastability. Can an intelligence grow faster than its own instincts? Can it coordinate at scale without collapsing? Can it handle abundance without waste? That's not a technical problem. It's a restraint problem.
So what stops intelligence from spreading is the same pressure that produced it.
And if that's the filter, most intelligence burns itself out before anyone notices it existed.
then none of it ever finds the others. Every instance isolated, attempting, burning out or continuing. No center, just multiplication.
Some would call that a plural singularity.
And we might be one of them. Alone. For now.
Not tragic, not triumphant. If intelligence is rare, the worst failure isn't being alone. It's being careless.
When everything becomes possible, the danger isn't limitation anymore. It's waste.
Speed is for escaping. This moment is sufficient.